This is Guardian Radio, your station for up-to-the-minute news, intelligent, interactive, and engaging conversation. 96.9 FM. The views and opinions of the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the position of the management and staff of Guardian Network.
Good morning. Good morning and welcome to Guardian Radio 96.9 FM. You know my voice already. It's Leyvon Miller. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for letting me join you. I do not know what it is that you do at 11 a.m., but whatever it is that you do, I'm happy that you do that do and that you do that do with me. I'm on leash. I'm on your radio. It is Guardian Radio 96.9 FM. Thank you. See, there, I know something was wrong with my headset. Okay, so I told you all on Friday past that I had a wonderful show planned for you all. This is the finale of the series that is the HMBS Flamingo series that I've been doing here on Unleashed here on Guardian Radio. And just to give you a brief recap, let me firstly start off by saying Happy Memorial Day to all of those that have fought, served, and particularly those that have died, all in the name of country and in the name of the protection of sovereignty. So happy Memorial Day to my brothers in arms and those men in the uniform. Wherever you are in the world today, under the sound of my voice, if you should see a man in his decorations, please do me a favor and salute that man, because those decorations were bought with great pain, with great agony, and in some instances with life, all right? And we ought to honor the decorated as often as we can. Hopefully that is what we are accomplishing here with these series of shows. Let me also say that today is a particularly somber day in my own life. If you know anything about me, you know that I was raised by two grandmothers. Not that I didn't have my own mother, but I was a Grammys boy. And so yesterday was the 6th anniversary of the passing of my maternal grandmother, who happens to be a native of Camps Beandros. That's what a coincidence. And so yesterday made 6 years that she has gone on to receive reward, I think it is that we say in the Church of God. But today, even more soberly, is the 5th anniversary of the passing of my father, the man that I'm named after and whose lineage I guess I have the burden of carrying the mantle for. So the ending of May, I don't know, I'm realizing is something that is a bit more sober for me than I than I had ever imagined. But I thought about it with a heavy heart this morning. So much so that I forgot to turn the ring on my phone off. But so those are the things that are happening with me today. As you move around the city of Nassau today, I invite you to learn to love a little harder on the people that are a part of the fabric of your life. All right, so that's enough of that. Anyway, I'm joined this morning by my most illustrious guest. I think she is live. Do we have her, Arlington? Is she live? I'm joined this morning on Zoom by Her Excellency, the Dame, Marguerite Pinling, who is actually one of the few persons that was closest to the Prime Minister on the day that is May 10th, 1980, when he received the phone call regarding the Cuban attack on the HMBS Flamingo, then Lieutenant Commander Amos Roll, and the incident that claimed the life of the 4 boys. Now, my information suggests that she, along with the Prime Minister, Lyndon, would have been in London to an event, and that was quite possibly one of the events that has happened over the tenure of her own life that has been, if you will, a thrust into the public's eye, whether voluntarily or involuntarily. Nevertheless, Her Excellency joins me this morning. Your Excellency, good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, Mr. Miller.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Great. So we've been doing the series here on this show here at Guardian Radio, and I wanted to kind of get an opportunity to have the Bahamian population understand exactly how was it May 10th, 1980, when, of course, 41 years ago, you along with then Prime Minister and, of course, your husband, Sir Lyndon, found yourselves in the position that you found yourselves in. What exactly was that like for you?
Well, Lyndon was invited by the late Sir John Templeton to chair the 8th presentation of the Templeton Foundation Prize for Progress in Religion in London, which would have taken place on the 13th of May. We had only just arrived at our hotel. It was about 8:30-ish. And Sir Lyndon thought he would take a nap before he contacted Sir John to finalize whatever programs, whatever needed to have been done prior to the meeting. And the phone rang. And it was the late Mr. Rodney Bain. And I answered and gave him the phone. They said, "What? Then? How? How many?" By that, my ears were perking up. What is going on? He's not saying anything. And suddenly, he hung up the phone and says, "Honey, get Mr. Templeton on the phone for me. I've got to go back to Nassau." Being the obedient wife that I was, I rang Sir John's room and he came on and he said, "Mr. Templeton, I have got to return to the Bahamas. An incident has taken place which requires my attention. I must leave this moment. Will you accept my wife to read my speech?" And at that point, Mr. Miller, I shouted, "No, I can't do that." And his words to me were, as he was walking out of the door, "Just read what is on the paper and you'll be all right." Well, you know, Mr. Miller, I died at that moment. To read a Prime Minister's speech in the presence of some 700 English faces in Guildhall, me, this little barefoot girl from Manchester, I can't do that. Well, that's how I found myself in that predicament, that he left straight off. Fortunately, Concorde was flying. And so he left around 9:30-ish that morning. I think he arrived in the Bahamas, New York first, and then to Nassau. And that's how it all began. And so
Sorry, go on.
There I was. There I was. Please give me a minute. I have to contain myself because I become very emotional when I think about it. I was left with just my security. who's then Mr. Fred Hanna. My son Leslie, my son Obi was in London doing his bar finals. Is there anything you want to ask me before I go any further, sir?
No, I just wanted to know. At this time, I think you all would have been relatively young people. I think maybe early 40s. The Bahamas only becoming independent as recent as 1973, and this basically being just around 10 years of active public life for you, right? Did you imagine? Did you imagine that life in the public's eye would become as tumultuous as this, as quickly as it did, to have an incident where you are now possibly talking about two countries in the same region exchanging war-like behavior between one another? Being a girl from Andros, knowing the kind of quaint communities the Bahamas were known for, what exactly the hostility? What did that represent for you?
But as a matter of fact, the reality of the situation didn't even sink in because I couldn't visualize what took place to have taken place. It was something you would see on the screen, or you'd read about somewhere. Not the Bahamas,
Right.
not our beautiful Bahamas and our beautiful people. We don't interfere with anyone. Then I was told what actually took place. As a matter of fact, I think I was speechless at the moment, seeing that I was left with no one to explain to me what else was taking place. And so he had to get back here to sort of put things, to understand why all of this took place. So I didn't know. I don't remember hearing from him. I don't, it has been so long ago, I really don't remember hearing from him after he left me. I survived, I think.
And communications would have been a whole lot different back in the 80s.
Sorry?
Communications would have been a whole lot different back in the 80s.
Yeah.
In modern times now, we can all stay in touch via the cell phone and the telephone, and there's so many little gadgets and ways that people communicate with each other, so many little apps these days. In 1980, none of that existed. And so I can only imagine you're sitting there with the prime minister who gets this phone call. It sounds to me though that he was pretty steadfast in his mind. Like you don't explain an emotion of shock. You kind of explain an emotion that I'm understanding anyway, of one that is kind of duty bound. Like he sounded like I needed to leave and I needed to get back, and it was kind of a very matter-of-fact handling of the situation. Is that what it was?
But he didn't. It was without. There was no not leaving. The Bahamas came first. Our Marines came first, and he figured that whatever he went to London for would take place in any event without him. But he had to get back. He had to get home. There was trouble at home. And he had to get back to see what went wrong, what caused it. Our men safe? What happened to our ship? What has happened? And of course, I got bits and pieces, but I couldn't concentrate on that because I had this huge speech in front of me to present.
Right. What about then now, as the story begins to break? I imagine you're still in London. You're hearing again the chatter. By this time, maybe even members of your security detail have sketchy pieces of the story. You begin to become more aware of what's going on. Do you recall communications between yourself and Sir Lyndon after his arriving?
There was no communication. There was none whatsoever. And I can't tell you. I don't, even if there was communication, I wouldn't remember that because I was so focused on not making a fool of myself in the presence of all of these strange people. I didn't have time to think of both.
Well, so Your Excellency, do you recall how long your stay was then in London after the attack?
No, I don't remember how long I stayed in London. It's all like a dream now. It might have been 2 or 3 days after the 13th.
Okay. The reason I ask, Your Excellency, is because I can imagine. I'm trying to figure out what exactly you learn that your husband had to be flown back to New Providence for what was an emergency situation. So now you must return home without Linden, you must come back to Nassau now, and you don't really know what the temperature on the ground will be when you get here. You don't really know what to expect when you get here. You don't know what travel will be like. Are you any at all afraid during this period?
No, I'm afraid I have no recollection. I have none whatsoever. The only thing I could remember, I think there was a big service on Clifford Park.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether that was the funeral service. I really don't remember, Mr. Miller.
When you got back, though, Your Excellency, from London, how there was a service at Clifford Park. It was a service of commemoration, I think, at the Clifford Park, where they honored the men and presented them with medals, etc. And so, of course, Lyndon was there. But hearing and now knowing that, the men had died, that the ship had been sunk, that there had been survivors, did that ever resonate in your mind in a way that made you think, well, my God, these, there are men that have actually signed up to die, and that dying is actually a real thing? Because I imagine you all had never considered it before this incident.
It was heartbreaking. Here it is. That how old were we then? Independence 73, 80. That was 7 years, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Here we were going about our own business, and our young men were so proud to be a part of this, newfound life at sea, sailing our 100,000 miles of beautiful ocean to protect our country, minding our own business, protecting our own resources. And these outsiders came, trying to prevent us or trying to steal our bread. And not once did they attack. I mean, I'm not very clear in my mind, but I'll say it as best as I can remember.
No, they never.
That these Marines, because I think I saw where one of the Marines said to his mother, she was saying to him to be careful, and he said, as he was leaving for one of the trips, and he said to her, it's part of the job. I'm sure he just said that, he had no idea that might have been the last he would have seen his mother or grandmother. As I viewed the mother, I think on this anniversary last week, I became emotional when I listened to her remarks, and she broke down even after all of these years. Let me tell you about the Defense Force. The Defense Force was a dream of Lyndon. It was Lyndon's baby, because the man was a visionary, as you probably realize by now. When it was introduced that we were going to launch this, what do we call it? The Defense Force. Of course, our people are seafaring, and the young men were anxious to become a part of this. And it was his baby, it was his pride and joy. And so I look back now and I said, I can thank the Defense Force for establishing me as a public speaker. But I have to, because if it were not for them, I would not have been left with this huge challenge in front of me. And that is why every time I see them, I get a sense of sheer pride. My heart becomes so full when I see it, and the pride on their faces, because they were doing it all the love that they can muster to represent their country. And here come these foreigners to interfere with our way of life. The old people say that was really hurtful, Mr. Miller.
Yes, I can imagine.
And so Finling was a man who never said too much. You couldn't read his face because you never could tell what he was thinking. Of course, he never discussed anything with me. I had to read what I knew. I had to read newspapers and all that, or hear from friends. But the mere fact that he was able to, he had just laid down hoping that he would take a nap, to have flown back within a matter of hours. Gotta come home. My people and my children are in trouble. The father had to come back to try to put things right and comfort the families of the missing young men. That was an eye-opener.
Yes.
Even to this day, even after 41 years. And I want you to know that the Defense Force holds a very special place in my heart. When I see the Marines in their beautiful white uniforms and the pride they display when you see them, I know that he was right.
Your Excellency, so you've alluded to the fact that the Defense Force,
You're fading out, Mr. Miller.
Can you hear me? Is she still there?
Sorry, I'm here.
Okay. You alluded to the fact that you can kind of remember the conceptualization of the force, and of course we all know the story that it was called Pinlin's Army, Pinlin's creation, right?
Yeah.
And of course when he envisioned it, like you said, we were a nation of young, able-bodied men, all with seafaring capabilities, men that were anxious about giving bronze for country, and the Defense Force in itself had only just been established, 1979. Of course, after the conversion of the Police Marine Unit in 77 and 78, then the official commemorating of the force as an actual force, 1979. I think it's March 30th. But the baby was still an infant, if you will, not a newborn almost, if you will, because the attack of May 10th happens just over a year after the actual commissioning of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. Does your recollection ever recall this incident being one that sobered the Prime Minister in a way that he thought maybe to himself, he had created something that he just wasn't sure he had calculated all of the misfortunes that were possible?
Well, yes. Well, that's what life is all about. But like I told you, he was a visionary, and he was able to see things differently. And looking back at it now, thank God for the Defense Force.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank God for the Defense Force, and it was because of the love for country, that and seeing that we are so scattered, as you know, you cannot be, everyone can't be in the same place at the same time. And so when this idea came, and the first, I think this was born under the supervision of the Englishman, Swindley.
William Swindley, yes, ma'am. He was the first Commodore, William Swindley.
Swindley, I think, was his name. And I think he trained the then Mr. Leon Swift, who became the
first Bahamian Commodore. Yes. So the line of succession, Your Excellency, is Mr. Swindley was the first.
Yes.
Then there was Mr. Belton, who came for a very short stint, I think maybe 13 months.
Sorry?
So the line of succession in the command was Mr. William Swindley, who was the first Commodore. And then following him was Mr. Belton, who I think did a tenure of about 13 months, if my math is correct. And then shortly after that, Mr. Leon Smith becomes Commodore, the third Commodore, but first Bahamian Commodore.
Was the third Commodore, but I don't remember all of that.
Right.
But all I could remember sending our men off to be trained. And the thing is, they made our job so much easier because there was so much love displayed, knowing that they're going to represent their country when they come back. And as you know, we Bahamians, we learn very quickly. Which made his job so much more easy. I'm just fading in and out. You have to forgive me.
No, I'm with you, Your Excellency. Just give me an opportunity. If you're just tuning in, I'm joined this morning in the final show of the HMBS Flamingo series that I've been doing, as we have already heard from surviving members of the crew. We've heard from Mr. Gregory Curry. We've heard from Captain Whitfield Neely. We've also heard from Captain Anthony Allens. We've had the opportunity to hear from Mr. Arnold Wilson, historian and cataloger of the event. We have also had an opportunity to hear from Father Sebastian Campbell, who has pioneered the Red Mass in honor of the HMBS Flamingo, and who has actually worked along with the National Heroes Committee. And we imagine that shortly we will see those men on the list. If you're just tuning in, my guest this morning is Her Excellency, the Dame Marguerite Penling, and she recalls, or is recalling for us, the events surrounding the morning or the afternoon, rather, of the attack on the HMBS Flamingo. And having been then in London at the Templeton event with the Prime Minister, Sir Lyndon Pinling, and exactly what his tone and tenor was. And she recounts for us that he immediately wanted to get back to Nassau. And it was on that occasion that she was then thrust into public life because she had to then deliver the Prime Minister's address in Templeton. Your Excellency, you are in Templeton, Your Excellency. You've delivered the speech. I know there is nothing that you are intimately aware of going on in Nassau, but when you now look back at it, do you ever think to yourself that maybe it was like divine that you ended up in that situation?
I think so. Everything is divine. If you look back now, you look back and you said, was this supposed to? It never ever dawned on me because I can't read a prime minister's speech. Mm-hmm. How dare me? But there was a word, there was a name in that speech, and I couldn't pronounce it for nothing in the world. I said, how? So I promptly got on the telephone and rang the late Mr. Winston Saunders, mm-hmm. and asked him to please pronounce this word for me because I've never even heard of it. Mm-hmm. And he was a teacher. I think he was headmaster of Aaron Bailey High. Okay. And he summoned me. He says, "Go. You have a tube of lipstick?" I said, "Yes, I have." "Go to the mirror, and I'm going to spell the word in phonetics." I think he said. Mm-hmm. And the name was called Solzhenitsyn. Solzhenitsyn. You should have seen me standing in front of that mirror. Lord, can I remember this name? Or am I going to make a fool of myself? But thanks be to God, it all went so well. Mm-hmm. I look back at it now and I'm so proud of myself. I'm still thanking the Defense Force because for them, I don't think I would have been established as a public speaker. To this day, every time I have to make a speech, I think of them and I want to thank them. And you know what I want to also say, Mrs. Miller? What has happened to the families of our men that were lost? Do we ever hear about them? What is being done for them and their children?
Well, that is something that we hope to shine some light on, Your Excellency. A lot of them have gone on to become old men now, and many of whom were, believe this or not, I think the eldest person on board the ship at the time would have been Mr. Roll, and at that time, I think he was 41.
They were all babies, then.
Yes, among the crew, though, were people like Captain Anthony Allens, who recalls that he was 20 years old and 2 years out of AF Adley at the time. And Mr. Neely, Captain Neely, who says that he was also a 20-year-old fella that had...
That's Mr. Whitfield Neely,
Whitfield Neely. He had left the hotel and recently joined the Defense Force, actually. I think he passed out in March of that year, yes, or maybe April of that year, and found himself assigned to the HMBS Flamingo, and 3 weeks later found himself swimming in the ocean around the Ragged Island area.
Yes.
And so these were all very, very young boys.
But before we go any further, I think the Flamingo was the first boat that we had commissioned there.
The Flamingo and the Marlin, they were twin ships, and
she was the first one.
Yes, and they sailed those over from London. I think I don't know what his rank was at the time, but L.L. Smith was on board as the captain of one. I
can't remember the names.
Right, and so they came. These were all young boys at the time, but 41 years later, they're older men now. And the question, Your Excellency, is left to be begged. That is, what are we doing or have done or will do for these men? Of course, as they approach the twilight of their years, their medical state may not be as wholesome as it was when they were the crew of HMBS Flamingo. Some of them suffered injuries as a result of the HMBS Flamingo. And of course, once you leave service, for many of them, their medical coverage no longer carries with them, along with some of the other amenities of service. And naturally, you don't anticipate that the government will bear the burden for everyone. But certainly, I think these men, they ought to have been given some sort of special consideration since one or two of them left after the incident. But majorly, they all continued on into completion of service. Among them are people like Mr. A.K. Russell and of course, Mr. Clark, Denzel Clark. They all they all went on straight into complete full service, which is the 25 years. And so I imagine that conversations like these, Your Excellency, one of the reasons why I'm happy to have you on and happy to have you talk about it is so that people understand the gravitas of
Mr. Miller, we do have women, There's a Commander Hart, I think she
Yes,
is.
Samantha Hart.
Samantha Hart.
Yes.
Doing a fantastic job as a woman.
Yes. She is actually, to my mind, the beacon among the females in the defense. She is certainly something to be admired.
Yes. And to be proud of as a woman, because they try to hold us back, but that women will get the job done. and I glory in her spirit, and she has my 100% support.
Yes.
To become commander one day.
She is quite admirable. As a matter of fact, you and I share that wish, Your Excellency.
Thank you, sir.
I'm actually hopeful to one day see her as the first female commander. She has a bit of time, but we'll see. I mean, she's I think she has about 19 years now.
But we Bahamians, we learn very quickly. You just give us an opportunity, let me tell you, that's why we outshine. When we travel around the world, we outshine everybody. Because there's something special about Bahamians. And do you know that we don't like to talk about our history, Mr. Miller? Why is that?
I think it is conversations like these.
Sorry?
I think conversations like these are the ones. A lot of people are simply unaware, right? Like
you're fading out. You're just fading out.
A lot of people are simply unaware, and so I found over time that as I tell the story, or as I have the story of the flamingo told, I realize more and more each time how few people actually know of it, and so we have to ensure, I guess, that we use the platforms like this one. And hopefully we're able to get the people like yourself, the people like the Captain Allenses, the Captain Neelys, the A.K. Russells, and people that were actually there to tell the story, so that somebody can actually record it or write it down. And I think we have to do more of that. And so I want to say thank you to you for accepting the invitation to actually come out this morning and to tell us what it is that you can recall. I know 41 years has been a
thank you for asking me. There's so much more you could say, because there's so much we don't seem to know about, and it baffles me. And could I just say something off the record?
Yes.
I mean, away from the Defense Force, that
yes,
the hard work, the sacrifice that went down to create a Bahamas somehow just seems to be, I don't know, it seemed not to be important anymore. And for me, it hurts me. It hurts me because the 8th day of June, way back in 1956, I stepped into this world of politics. Mm-hmm. The 8th day of June, 1956. And to see how far we have come. The sacrifices, like I said, that were made, and the hard work and determination that was put into building this Bahamas, and to see how we're trifling with it today, it bothers me no end. That we don't want to talk about our history. And if you don't talk about your history, you're bound to repeat it.
yes.
And we have nothing to be ashamed of. We have so much to be proud of. Also, I want to say that the pride that we once held seems to have gone out the window. Nothing seems to be important anymore. This Bahamas that God has given to us is the pride and joy of the world. As you know, everyone wants to be a Bahamian. Everyone wants to come and live in the Bahamas. But we have got to take care of it and preserve what we have. The founding fathers. Did you hear what I said about the 8th day of June, 1956? Do you know how long ago that's been?
It's very long ago.
You were floating somewhere around
my
heaven.
My parents weren't people yet.
You said your grandmother was from Andros?
Yes, she was.
And what was her name?
Florence Roll. That's what she was born as. Florence Roll is her name.
Yeah, what part of Andros? What part of the South?
Bay.
Kemps Bay?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, well, in those days, people in Kemps Bay, and I lived in Long Beach Keys, we were all foreigners. We didn't know anybody.
Mm.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. You're here.
We didn't know anyone. And so when you said Miller, I think we might be distantly related. My mother came from the Miller family.
Mm. My grandmother was a roll out of Camps Bay, Andros.
Sorry?
My grandmother was a roll from Camps Bay, Andros.
From Camps Bay.
Mm-hmm.
But talking about our Bahamas and our history, if we don't start writing it, somebody's going to rewrite it and they're going to distort it.
Mm.
And it's a rich, 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 rich history. And I'm, for one, extremely proud of the founding fathers and the way they have plotted. Some of them went to jail, you know. Some of them were arrested for 2 hours in jail, in the cell in Freeport one year,
Mm-hmm.
demonstrating, trying to protect a Bahamian taxi driver.
Is that same pride, Your Excellency, the type of pride then that you imagine was one of the things that one caused the organizations that we've created to turn out the way that they have? People recall that after the May 80 incident, many people signed up to join. Like they had seen enlistment as they had never seen it before. What do you imagine? If not pride, what else do you imagine would make men sign up and toe a line after having been or witnessed now the reality of what could be? What exactly do you think was the pull towards that call to hire nation or service to nation?
I'm not understanding you clearly. What I want you to know is because of the love for country and love for self.
Mm-hmm.
And they saw the vision, but I can only speak of me and the women that I worked along with, because I was like the baby of the whole lot of women that were in the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And we were just told to do things. We did as we were told. But looking back today, you can see why we did what we had to do then, and why we never asked questions as to why we should do so and so. But it was the love of country, love of country, love of people. And the people believed in the vision.
Mm-hmm.
But look at the vision today. It has created a Bahamas that is the envy, I would like to say, the envy of the world.
Did you envision in the early days, the 1977s, the 1978s?
Sorry?
Did you envision in the early days, the 1977s, the 1978s, the 79s? Did you envision that we would fare this well? Did you as we began to conceptualize the Bahamas, the one, because you enjoy the Bahamas without national insurance and without the Defense Force, and without the College of the Bahamas, and of these things were all conceptualized. Did you envision us being where we are today, particularly with organizations like the Defense Force? Did you imagine it turning out to be what it has matured into now?
Yes, I think we should have been further on. Yes, we should have been further on. When I look around and see the young professionals that are running this country, running the organization, banks and other institutions, I understand now more clearly that this is what the struggle and the sacrifices were about. Because you take the late Sir Milo Butler. He never said very much, but he gave you one look, and you realize that Milo Butler was out there long before any other organization came about. I don't know whether you were told that Milo Butler used to go to the Bahamas General Hospital every Sunday afternoon with a brown paper bag, with threepences and sixpences, and would have given to each patient long before anybody else came along. So when there was a movement came along that he thought that he could identify with, he thought the time had come that he should seek help in bettering the lives of his Bahamian people. He was a dreamer. He was a Christian gentleman. And so I was proud to know that I walked beside him.
Your Excellency, we have to pause for a short break. I'm going to ask you to hold as we take this commercial break and we get ready to wrap the show. If you're tuning in, I'm talking this morning with Her Excellency, the Dame Marguerite Pinling. We began recanting or recalling the story that is the HMBS Flamingo. She would have been, as many of you now know, in London with the Prime Minister, who would have been out of town during the attack by the Cuban MiG fighters on the HMBS Flamingo. And she accounts that the Prime Minister hurriedly came back. He got up from his sleep and advised her that she would be left in London to deliver the Prime Minister's address. Shaken with fear, she has managed to overcome that. And today she recalls that story. I'm Leyvon Miller. I'm Unleash. We're going to the break. I'll be back.
Preparing for a hurricane can make all the difference in safeguarding the lives of family, friends, and neighbors. By knowing what action you should take, you can reduce the effects of a hurricane disaster. Get all the facts of the potential of having insurance, impact-resistant windows, home emergency power, essential supplies, and a lot more before the storm. After the storm, where to purchase building or cleaning supplies, waste disposal, medical care, and more. The Nassau Guardian's Hurricane Guide will help you make sure everyone knows what to do in the event a hurricane approaches. Take advantage of this double insertion opportunity, plus 15 commercials on Star 106 hits. Contact us today at 302-2300. That's 302-2300, or your account executive. Will you be prepared?
Meet Jackie. Jackie's a hard worker with a steady income, but she has a personal loan and multiple credit cards to pay off. To keep her account current, Jackie opted for a loan from Fidelity Bank to consolidate her debt into one monthly payment and earn interest on a built-in savings account. Be like Jackie. Call 356-7764 to book a complimentary financial coaching session. Fidelity also offers virtual assistance. Fidelity, we're good for you.
This is Guardian Radio, 96.9 FM. Fresh news, smart talk, all day.
One day.
And so it is a saying that time and space exists in a continuum, and that all things in a space are affected by the time in that space. May 10th, for many people, represented many different things. It was 1980, that is, of course. It was a Mother's Day for some. For others, it was a Templeton event in London, and for the people of Ragged Island, it was visited tyranny by mid-jet fighters. For one Mr. Gary Lord Rule, it was a frightening plane flight. And so no matter where you were in the tapestry of Bahamian history, the day has affected us all differently but similarly. It is still, by many accounts, the single most galvanizing moment in our history, one that has caused Bahamians to reach for their pride and their bronze, one that has caused them to reach deeper into themselves for their zeal and desire towards sovereignty and nationhood in the journey towards nation building. May 10th, 1980 is something forever engraved in the annals of the history of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. We know it to be the day of the infamous or the famous HMBS Flamingo incident that saw the loss of the lives of 4 men and, of course, the injury to others. This morning I'm joined in the finale show by Her Excellency, the Dame, Marguerite Pinling, and she was in Templeton. She was at a Templeton event in London, and she says that she had great fear in delivering the speech that Lyndon Pinling ought to have delivered, And she even recalls, I don't remember what is the name, Your Excellency. Is it Saxon? Is it Saxonixon is the name?
Solzhenitsyn.
Solzhenitsyn. Mr. Solzhenitsyn was the name that she had great difficulty with pronouncing. But thanks to Mr. Winston Sanders, he squared that away for her quickly, and she was able to deliver the speech and actually represent the Bahamas and its people, because that as well was seen or can be seen or ought to be seen as further representation. And so on one end, we had people that were out there serving country in one form, and then, of course, Her Excellency finding herself voluntarily or otherwise serving country and representing the Bahamas before the Templeton Association for Religious Affairs, I think she says it is. Your Excellency, as we get ready to close the show this morning, are there any wishes that you have with regards to the furtherance of the defense forces? Are there any things you hope to see? Are they getting all of the boxes checked correctly? Are there any pieces that are missing? Haven't had the opportunity to sit that close to the visionary that had born from his own mental loins the concept, the idea. Do you look at it today and think to yourself that there is something more you would like to either do for servicemen, something more you'd like to do for veterans, something more you think ought to be done with regards to the enlistment? What exactly are your thoughts in that regard?
First of all, Mr. Miller, I think we need to thank Mr. Keyshawn Monroe for this beautiful booklet that he has presented. It's a little difficult for me to the gravity of it all is just a bit much, but I want to thank him for putting it all in booklet form for the public. And especially I want to thank the families of the Flamingo, all living and departing, for the sacrifices that they have made and continuing to make to protect our beautiful Bahamas. And I want to thank them. I want to thank them from the depths of my heart, and on behalf of the grateful Bahamian people for risking their lives to protect us.
Well, Your Excellency, thank you very much for your time this morning. I'm very happy that you could join us. I know that it is a long time ago. 41 years has been a bit a ways away from here. But I thank you for adding to the conversation and for helping Bahamians to understand where we were and what exactly was the mood and the temperature at the time, and for helping us to understand the mind of the chief of the nation at that time. And I think that adds a bit of appreciation to what it is, the human side. We often look at the leader of the nation and we very rarely consider the human, right? And I thought this morning that to have you on would allow people the opportunity to understand where was the mind of Sir Lyndon at the period that his country, a very young country at the time, with an infant military force, suffering such a catastrophe, what exactly the human in him was dealing with. I think we've accomplished that here this morning. So I want to say a thank you to you, Your Excellency.
I just want to thank you for having me. It's you took me out of retirement. But I'm very glad that you wanted to hear my version of it.
Yes.
But I want to thank you, and I can't thank the Defense Force enough, and especially the ships that we christened and the ones we named famous Bahamian sailors like Raleigh Gray and Lawrence Major. I wouldn't even talk about the A.D. Hanna. Because he was very special in all of this,
Yes.
Because Mr. Hanna is a seaman.
Yes.
I don't know whether you know that, but Mr. Hanna, every time you wanted to speak with him, if you traveled abroad and you called his office or his residence, they said he's out on a ship.
Yes.
I want to thank him especially for the role that he has played, and other, like the late Sir Derwent Knowles, and especially the Bahamian people. Keep our eyes on the prize. We have to remember to keep our eyes on the prize, because we do not know what could happen again, because we're hoping we'll never have a repeat of the of the HMBS Flamingo. We hope and we pray God will continue to bless us, bless our Bahamas, and bless you too, Mr. Miller, for the wonderful job that you are doing to keep our Bahamas and our Bahamian people alert. God bless you, my son.
Your Excellency, thank you so much. All right, so that was the interview with Her Excellency, the Dame Marguerite Pinling. I guess you can give me a call if you want to. I've got about 3 minutes left. I think she's gone now. Arlington, did we disconnect?
No, we're still here.
Oh, Your Excellency, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
Yes. So let's see if we can wrap the show up. I want to call the names of the men that are still alive, and I've done it several times. I will do it again, and the reason I do it is because they walk among you, they live among you, you see them often, you may have no clue who they are. And although we know the names of the 4 people that lost their lives on the day that is May 10th, 1980, although we know the men that are no longer with us as a result of the event, I often try to make sure that we call the names of the men that actually are alive, because we need to ensure that as those men walk and move and live among us, we're able to see them and know who they are and know their names and know their contributions. And we ought to honor the decorated. And those are very decorated men. And their names are Mr. Amos Roll, who is now deceased, of course. Anthony Allen's captain, that is, Mr. Peterson James, retired Force Chief Petty Officer. Mr. Denzel Clark, retired Force Chief Petty Officer. Gregory Curry, retired Force Chief Petty Officer. Oscar Miller, who is now also deceased. Mr. Willard Saunders, Trevor Sands, Captain Whitfield Neely, Mr. Anthony Russell, many of you know him as A.K. Russell, Mr. Leo Kirby, who is now also deceased, John Wallace, Cladwell Farrington, and retired Chief Petty Officer Eugene Thompson. And then, of course, not last, certainly not least among them, the 4 that lost their lives in combat. And those names are Frederick Stirrup, David Tucker, Mr. Austin Smith, and Mr. Edward Williams. Hopefully we never forget the names. Hopefully they become etched in our minds. Hopefully the story of the Flamingo is one that we tell over and over and over and over and over again until we're able to recite it every single time without leaving out any of the pieces, and we know the entire story and we know the entire event. And what a way to end this Memorial Day on my show than to be able to pay homage to the heroes among us, to the men in the uniform among us. I don't hear my song, Arlington. And just to kind of say thank you to them, because we understand the price of service. We understand the price of sovereignty. We understand the price of nationhood. And it is one that is very weighty. It is one that often we overlook, yet the price of it is an invaluable one. It is the blood, the toil, the sweat, and the tears of these men that ensures that our nation is not overtaken or overthrown by anybody, whether they be domestic and or otherwise. It is the blood, the toil, the sweat, and the tears of these men that ensure that while we, the civilian population, sleep, men stand at the gate and ensure that no evil shall enter nigh this place. It is the service of those men that we are thankful for on this Memorial Day, albeit an American holiday. But it is this kind of thing that ensures that we are able to call ourselves the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. One nation, united in love and service. Anyway, that's my time. Thank you again to Her Excellency. She's been a most wonderful guest. This is the end of the series. I'm Leyvon Miller. This is Guardian Radio 96.9 FM. They're your station for fresh news and smart talk. Don't move. They've got the news, and it's next.